Hello and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and in the first few episodes of this podcast at the start of the year, we talked about cuttings and how to take cuttings and different wherewithals, how, why, where, and when. And I didn't mention hardwood cuttings, which are not used very often in hydroponics, but they are a often neglected form of propagation. We've talked about a few neglected techniques in horticulture recently. So I thought I'd talk about hardwood cuttings and when you might want to use them, because I've seen some people doing what we call softwood cuttings or normal cuttings for crops in hydroponics that should really have been hardwood cuttings recently. And as we're getting into autumn and winter, this is a good time to talk about hardwood cuttings. So have you ever heard of them? Have you ever used them? The use of hardwood cuttings is a good way of propagating deciduous woody perennials. So plants that leave their leaves in the winter that have got woody stems and live for a number of years. So in the late autumn, as we're getting into now, once it's past Halloween and winter, it's an especially good method for use on deciduous trees and shrubs. Now, for hardwood cuttings, there is far less of a requirement for control over the propagation environment compared to softwood cuttings. This is its big advantage. You don't need to have a protected growing environment and control the temperature and the humidity as much. So hardwood cuttings can be taken in the absence of protected environments and placed directly into the growing media. As a result, hardwood cuttings are cheaper, easier, and more convenient to produce than softwood cuttings, and it can have a much higher success rate. They do take longer, though, to root because they are essentially a dormant stem. They can be formed from material generated from hard winter pruning or deciduous woody perennials. So if you've pruned a tree, say that you're interested in, like a willow tree, then you could just take them and take the pruning and use that. Now, for some, there might be a specific time of year that's best, so you might want to do some research. So the pruning often, the time you prune the plant might be the more critical than the best for cuttings. So this can be the case for, let me have a look, currants. So anything in the ribes genus, grapes, mulberries, honeysuckles, Chinese Virginia creeper, and snowberry, they all match. The time you prune them is the time that is actually good for taking cuttings. Because of the need for less control over the growing environment, little scientific optimization has been undertaken on hardwood cutting propagation methods. What is known is that only certain trees and shrubs are conducive to hardwood cuttings. So always research the propagation method that can be used for the certain plant species you're trying to propagate. Hardwood cuttings can also benefit from a small amount of basal heat. So normally you keep them in a cold shed or greenhouse, and then just put some basal heat, so bottom heat, to keep the roots nice and warm, get the cells dividing, get the callus formation forming before they form roots. The best way to achieve this at home is to place the cuttings in sand in a heated propagator on the lowest heating setting, and then place the propagator in an unheated greenhouse, shed or garage. Now, you can do hardwood cuttings in hydroponics as well. So you could do hydroponics and you can use rooting hormone. You can use IBA, indole, butyric acid. I think they're slightly higher concentrations than for softwood cutting. So 0.3 to 0.8% auxin. Now, if you're buying a off-the-shelf rooting hormone, then you might not be able to get those concentrations in there. But if you bought an auxin concentrate, like Utrima's auxin concentrate, you could potentially go higher. So that's an option. You could use DWC or probably aeroponics potentially to get it, but you would have to have the hydroponic system running for a long time and that is a disadvantage for rooting hardwood cuttings. You don't want to be running a hydroponic system for a long time. So you might want to do some sort of semi-hydroponics or just grow in sand and then transfer them from the sand into your growing media and your hydroponic system thereafter. You don't want to be putting them into soil and then trying to transfer a cutting from soil into hydroponics. World of pain there, because you get all the bugs and the bacteria and the pests and the disease and the animals from the soil, and it mucks up your hydroponic system. So grow it in some nice clean horticultural sand if you can, or try it in perlite or vermiculite as well, just making sure they're nice and cool. Don't heat your hardwood cuttings too much. After rooting can take between 2 and maybe 2 weeks to 12 plus weeks, really, depending on the species. You could gradually increase the EC and then transfer them to a more conducive growing environment where they should bud and start growing away. So that's important. Watch out for pythium, slimy brown roots, and prevent that by keeping them nice and cool and not too much water. So very much an option there for growing various plants. What else we took? Any other plants that we haven't mentioned? Willow, poplar, forsythia, dogwood, hydrangea, viburnum. So maybe if you were growing tea, that is a plant that is very good to grow with hardwood cuttings. Is it a deciduous though? Let me just check. If camellia, that's not deciduous, is it? No, I'm talking rubbish. What sort of crops? Mulberry. There's some hydroponic willow being grown. Not aware of anyone using forsythia. Dogwoods are can sell for a lot of money, ornamental dogwoods. Hydrangeas, some rare species of hydrangeas. Mulberries are a great crop, produce lovely fruit, but the fruit don't transport well. So I always think it'd be a good one for like local restaurants to grow mulberry, because you can't transport it. So you can make an advantage of that. You say, you can only buy this here, sort of thing. So yeah, maybe one for the mulberry growers, hydroponics. If you have done hardwood cuttings and got any other tips or some species that you find are surprisingly good for hardwood cuttings, let me know. If you found this podcast useful, please leave us an Apple podcast review if you listen on Apple. And if you listen on any other podcast provider, don't bother with a review because it's useless. It doesn't help the podcast in any way. But if you do want to help the podcast, then please check out utrema.co.uk. That's the website for my company. And we sell all sorts of crazy and interesting fertilizers, biostimulants, and biopesticides. And if you can't spell Utrema, it's Latin for wasabi. And I'll see you again tomorrow on Hydroponics Daily. Thank you for listening.